Deal Ignite. Today with me, I've got Jill Valdez, and Jill and I are going to talk about the four absolutes of organizational health. So it's about motivating staff, especially if the people don't work for you. Well, we shouldn't be telling them people what to do anyway, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Before we get in, Jill, where can people find you? Because you're a bit of a master on social in terms of where you are, aren't you?
Yeah. The easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn,
Mm.
and I love connecting with people there. And then they can also go to my website, which is linkconsulting.info.
Okay, go through that again. Linkconsulting.info.
.info. Mm-hmm.
Right, brilliant.
Yeah.
So Jill, you come from a non-for-profit background. So
Yes.
your background is motivating and getting volunteers. So they're not even, it's not that they don't report to you, which they don't. They're not even being paid.
Right.
So
And,
so
and that, yeah.
yeah, go on.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, and that. So I mean, I remember, I remember going up through ranks in leadership, and it was a case of, I always used to say when didn't have people reporting to me, if only they reported me, I could just tell them what to do. And of course, if you actually tell people what to do, they actually do the opposite. And so what is it that tell us your background and what you
Sure.
learned in that.
Yeah. You so my background is I worked in nonprofits, and so anytime that we wanted to get things done, people don't realize how much nonprofits really are a business, and that eluded nonprofit leaders for years, but now they've really come up to understand that, and so they treat it as a business, and so if you're gonna accomplish your tasks for the day, if you're gonna accomplish pulling off major events, and all you have is volunteers, it, you get to direct them, but they don't have to show up. They can say, "Oh, I don't feel good today." They don't even have to have an excuse. They just flat out don't show up. And so, in learning that, and in learning how to connect with people, because if they didn't show up, I was in trouble. Like
Mm.
anything that I planned was based on the premise of having X amount of volunteers, people who said that they were going to be a part. And so that kind of is my background, is just learning how to work with people as opposed to my minions.
Yes. My
Yeah.
my mother, who's 84, is a volunteer. She
Yeah.
works in what is a theatre stroke cinema, and it's like that. If no one turns up, then there's no one to sell the tickets, and there's no one to show people to the
Right.
seats. I mean, it's across all uh, charities, I guess.
One of the organizations I led, we were a food distribution organization, and we provided groceries for 350 families every week. And we didn't have our own space; we shared a space, and so every week we would have to come in. We'd set it up, and we set it up like a grocery store, and it was a massive production that we pulled off every week. And you had to register them, and then we hand out like 22,000 pounds of food. The average age of the volunteer was 76 years old. And yet they would show up week after week and bust their butts to come and be a part of this amazing work that was happening every week.
So you came up with these. So, well, how did you come up with um, these four absolutes? What talk us through that? Talk us through the strategy of that.
Yeah. What happened was I left the nonprofit sector and decided to jump into the for-profit sector. And when I did, I thought that business had progressed enough, and that there had been enough talk about leadership, that leaders understood that simply saying to an employee, "I pay you every week," or "I pay you to be here," I thought leaders understood that that wasn't going to be enough, that they knew how to bring out the best in their people. And so I went to work for a couple of different companies and found that they did not know how to do that at all. And so as I have been out of the nonprofit sector and working in the for-profit sector and working with businesses, what I was thinking was intuitive to leaders, and found that they didn't understand it, then that kind of led me to put together these 4 absolutes, so that then they could say, okay, these are the steps that I need to take. This is how I bring out the best in my people. This is how I make my organization not only successful, not only making money, but also this amazing place to work where employees love to come. They love to bring their best. And it's an atmosphere of celebration of the great work that we're doing. And so that's how I came up with the 4 absolutes: is what is it? What are the absolutes? Because everybody talks about employee engagement. That's been a big buzz term for the last 5 years.
Yes.
And yet nobody's known really what that means or how to define that. And so going through my own journey of trying to figure out how to really say, this is what employee engagement is. This is what that means. This is what the outcome looks like. That's how I came up with the 4 absolutes.
Right. And I agree with you. I think that, I've just been on a Twitter chat, which is all about, retaining employees and culture and things have changed so much.
Right.
And retaining people and recruiting people have come back to the top of people's priority lists, because there's been such a movement of, here in the UK, we can't get waiting staff because all the people that worked in who were waiters said, or waitresses basically said, well, I haven't got a job, so I'm going to go and do something else.
Yes.
And so, there's been this whole mix of, it's like someone got the employment a jar with all, and then shook it up. It's that, and nobody knows where it's going to land. It's one of those snow dome things. So why don't you walk us through our 4 absolutes?
Absolutely. So the 4 absolutes of a healthy organization are communication, cohesion, clarity, and consistency. Communication, cohesion, clarity, and consistency.
Good, because that's what I've got written down here.
Good. Yay, I got it right.
Yeah.
And so communication really is the foundation of it all. It doesn't matter how cohesive your team is. It doesn't matter if you're clear about what you're supposed to be doing and if you're consistently doing it. If nobody's talking about it, if the messages, and not in a marketing, advertising, messaging kind of way, but in interacting with each other and in interacting with clients. But if there's no communication taking place, then all the rest of it is just kind of out there, and still everybody is doing kind of their own thing. There's going to be what companies are going to see is they're going to see lack. There's going to be a lack of efficiency. There's going to be misunderstandings. There's going to be unhealthy conflict. So communication really is the core piece. And what I teach people is that we communicate based on our personality.
Yeah.
And so when I'm working with a company, I talk about personalities, and I talk about how each personality will communicate. Everybody communicates differently. So I use the DISC profile simply because it's easy for people to remember. Excuse me one second.
It's a pretty much a standard, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So, somebody who's a D as opposed to somebody who is an S, they're going to have these different communication styles. They're going to be speaking differently. They're going to be hearing and processing differently. So that has to be established. People have to have that understanding in order for effective communication to take place. Because if effective communication isn't taking place, then still at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of the frustrations that business owners are complaining about now. And you're still not going to be kind of shoring up the problems of employee turnover and missed deadlines and those kinds of problems that can plague small businesses.
And I think that one of the things that I know happens with communication is that I say something and you hear something different.
Right.
And I remember it was one of the first board meetings I went when I set up DLA Ignite. Our chairperson said what he called psychological contracts, which is where, I may say at an interview, if you work really hard, we'll give you promotion. But your definition of working hard and my definition of working hard is different.
Exactly. Yeah. I had a friend, she was actually a friend of mine, and I had posted on Facebook about what I do and about communication. And she calls me up and she's like, Jill, you have to come and work with me. You have to come and work with my team. And she went on and on about how awful her team was and how frustrated she was and blah, blah, blah. So the first thing I did was the communication workshop. And after they took the DISC profile, it became very clear what the problem was. And the problem was that you had one person who was a very high D, so super driven, super task oriented, doesn't care about the fluff of life. And then the rest of the team were all S's and C's. So they were slow moving, they cared about each other, they were about the people. And all of a sudden, like I was a little concerned because I knew that I was going to have this conversation with her, like, some of the problem is you. And all of a sudden she looks at me and because she was a high D, and and she was frustrated that her team wanted to come in on Monday mornings and talk about what they did on their weekend, and she's like, I just wanted them to get their work.
Yeah.
So we start the conference, and I'm doing the teaching, and about halfway through, you could literally see the light bulb. She looks at me and she goes, oh my gosh, I'm the problem. I was like, oh phew, I don't have to say that. But then we got to talk about how those different personalities, how they interact and what their needs are. Her team needed for her to recognize them as people and not just as cogs carrying out the tasks of the business. And conversely, they needed to understand that she was very driven and she focused on task, and it wasn't because she was a mean person. She wasn't a hag. She just was a very driven person. And so there was that understanding. You could physically feel the difference when I went back 6 weeks later between all of their relationships. And just because of the communication that happened, that understanding that took place.
So what about the next one, cohesion?
Cohesion comes from having a team that works really well together. Taking from Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, a cohesive team knows how to work together. And that in a small business, there's going to be a leadership team. There's going to be that higher up level that kind of oversees everything, but there's still going to be a requirement of cohesion for everybody. And so cohesive teams, they trust each other. Again, that goes back to communication as being foundational, but they're going to trust each other. They're going to trust each other that each person is there looking out for the best of the company, which means that they're looking out for the best for each other. They're not going to be afraid of conflict. And again, organizations, they tend to shy away from that because conflict in their mind is, oh my gosh, something's wrong. And conflict, and Lencioni talks about this, conflict just means that you are working towards solutions to find what's going to be best for the company.
Yeah.
Conflict doesn't have to be a bad thing. Where conflict gets really bad is when it becomes personal. But conflict doesn't even have to become personal. Conflict can be very, very healthy. And so a cohesive team knows how to have that. A cohesive team knows about accountability. Again, that most of our world have the personality to where they're very adverse to conflict and they're very adverse to holding people accountable and especially now in today's day and age, like I think that leaders and small business owners are kind of feeling held hostage a little bit in that if they hold somebody accountable, that person's just going to up and quit. Well, if they up and quit because you're holding them accountable, you don't want them on your team anyway, because they're not doing you a service. They're going to constantly be that thing in your organization that keeps you from growing, that keeps you from being the best that you could possibly be.
And I think as a leader, I know it's actually quite difficult to you want conflict, because otherwise you get just like an echo chamber of people just agreeing, and you don't get the innovation. And today you have to get innovation.
Oh yeah. Oh, if you're not innovating, you're dead. Like, look at Toys R Us. Toys R Us was this company people figured was going to be around forever. And it's not that toys have gone away. It's not that people don't go into stores and buy toys. I mean, none of that has changed, but Toys R Us did not transform and keep innovating, and in doing that, they've now become obsolete,
Mhm.
which is so crazy.
Well, yes. I mean, I heard on the news that Walmart are going to go into the metaverse, and
Yeah,
maybe that's about, the innovation
right.
of them saying, well, we don't, they actually do a load of stuff on the blockchain, so why not the metaverse? But that's a business, a big business that's actually innovating.
Right. Yeah. And small businesses can be innovative as well. Um, they just because they're small doesn't mean that they can't think big and that they can't dream big and that they can't think of, I mean, every company started out as a small business. Apple started out in the garage, Microsoft started out tiny. Like, all of them started out as just this small little thing that grew. Um, but that
So,
comes from also having being surrounded by people that you can trust,
mm,
who are not going to be afraid to challenge the status quo. They're not going to be afraid to say that's a bad idea, or have you thought about this? And not afraid to say, hey, we had this idea, we were working towards this, where are you at on that project, and what has kept you from being further or being where you said you were going to be.
mm.
That's cohesion.
So good cohesion. So clarity.
Clarity comes from understanding really what you're about. There's so many business owners that I see that simply assume that the rest of their team knows really what the business is about, that somehow through osmosis that the employees have gathered all of what's in the small business owner's mind, and that they know where things are going. And again, that goes, it affects communication, it affects cohesion. So if you don't have clarity, if everyone doesn't have clarity, and it starts with the top, of knowing who you are, what you want to be known for, and where you're going, um, and and knowing your why. Simon Sinek made that very, very popular, of knowing your why. But if you don't know your why, and your why can't simply just be just to make money, there
Yeah.
has to be a purpose of what you're doing. Otherwise, your employees, you're going to see that disconnect, because they're not going to be able to connect their heart and their passion with your why. It's one of the things I teach, like when businesses are hiring, if they don't know what their core values are, how can they look at a candidate and say, oh, this person's going to fit really great in our organization? They're going to fit so well in our culture. They can't say that because they don't know if there's an alignment of core values. Or a candidate who's looking at coming onto a company, they can't look at that company and go, oh, that's what that company is about. This is what drives them. This is who they want to be. This is who they want to attract. I'm that person, and I'm going to fit well there. So
Yeah,
that's the
I was
importance of
given some
clarity.
advice. I was given some advice about core values once, which was that, I asked the question. So when things go wrong, what do you do? And they said, well, the core values are the things that you actually reach for,
Hmm.
and the core
Wow.
values are the things that you actually hang on to weather the storm. Would you
Yeah.
agree with that, or?
Yeah, because not that those things never change. Because again, as a company changes, there might be a need for a core value to change it. The core values of a small business might not carry over as the business grows. Um, but if you're super, super lost, if you're lost as an organization, that's one of the first places you can go back to, is say, remember, this is the core values define who you are. And so you can go back to that and say, "Ah, remember, this is who we said that we wanted to be. This is the things that we wanted to bring into the to our world."
So, consistency, the
Yeah.
final piece in the jigsaw.
Yeah. How often have I seen small businesses, and I'm sure that you have too, people, I mean, even right now, right? We're in January. What did everybody do January 1st? Oh, I set goals, I set resolutions, and most of them don't even make it 90 days. I think the statistic is like 82% of people do not, 90 days later, are not even thinking about what they said on January 1st that they wanted to do. And so the consistency comes from revisiting your goals, revisiting your core values, revisiting your communication, revisiting all that you've learned and taught each other, and saying, oh yeah, it's making sure that you're not getting off. Because I read somewhere that if a boat is just 1 degree off, that, you know, by the time 90 days goes by, they could be a good 12 to 30% off of what was supposed to be their route. And it's easy for companies to do that. So that's the consistency, is going back and reminding yourself and reminding your people. It's not enough to just keep it all in your head, or even just to keep it all within the leadership team. That's part of what made that organization that I was leading successful. Is every week I would remind the volunteers, this is who we are. This is why we're doing it. I would tell a story about somebody who had benefited from the work that we were doing the week before, and tell a story highlighting a volunteer. It's with that consistent reminder of why we're doing what we're doing, the how of what we're doing, and what we see as the outcome, that keeps people on board and keeps them engaged.
Jill, thank you so much. The 20 minutes goes very, very quickly. I think that's fantastic.
It does.
I mean, you know, the 4 absolutes of organizational health: communication, cohesion, clarity, and consistency. Fantastic. Where can people find you? Remind people about your LinkedIn and your website.
Yeah, for sure. Come and find me on LinkedIn. Let me know that you saw me on this in our conversation. And then you can go to my website, linkconsulting.info. I actually have a free gift. If you go to the website, at the top in the banner, it'll say bringing out the best in your people. I have a free guide on how you can bring out the best in your people. And, you know, it is for the business owner, it's for the manager, but it's also for the family person. You know, you can apply all those principles in your personal relationships as well as your business relationships. So linkconsulting.info.
linkconsulting.info. And thanks thanks for all the for Damon, Mike, John, and Bill, and all his students. Thank you for tuning in as well.
Yeah, there's a great group of people out there in LinkedIn. I'm so blessed to be connected to them.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks.